I always thought surviving a heart attack would be the scariest moment of my life. I was wrong. The real shock came when I checked my bank account after leaving the hospital and found less than $5,000 left. Just weeks earlier, my wife and I had over $2.4 million spread across our accounts. But while I was fighting for my life, she was draining every cent and disappearing without a trace. All she left behind was a note on the kitchen counter. I deserve better than being controlled by your money. Consider this my severance package. 8 years of marriage, gone in a heartbeat, along with nearly everything I worked for. But what Vanessa didn't know was that I had prepared for betrayal like this long before she made her move. And when I remembered the secret offshore account she had no idea existed, that's when I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. What would you do if the person you love most robbed you while you were at your weakest? Subscribe to our channel and stay tuned, because I'm not just taking revenge. I made sure she'd regret underestimating me for the rest of her life. I wasn't born into wealth. Every dollar I had was earned through long nights, smart investments, and learning from other people's mistakes. By the time I turned 45, I was managing portfolios for some of the richest families in San Francisco. I knew how fragile fortune could be, how fast it could disappear if you weren't careful. That's why I live by one rule. Always protect your assets, even from those closest to you. But somewhere along the way, I let my guard down with Vanessa. We met 9 years ago at a charity gala. She was captivating, former model, turning heads with every step, full of life and ambition. I was the quiet, calculated investment banker who usually avoided the spotlight. But that night, she made me feel like more than just a numbers guy. Within a year, we were married. At first, our differences felt exciting. She loved luxury, designer clothes, exotic vacations, five-star everything. I didn't mind because I could afford it, as long as we stuck to my financial plan. I always made sure a significant portion of our income went into savings and low-risk investments. I wasn't just thinking about today, I was thinking about 10, 20 years down the line. But Vanessa didn't care about future security. She cared about now. And the more I said no to her spending habits, the more she saw me as controlling. The cracks in our marriage started small. Arguments over credit card bills, her impulsive purchases, the friends she kept who only seemed interested in her money, or rather, my money. Then came Jason, her personal trainer. At first, I thought nothing of it. She wanted to stay fit, and Jason was just another part of her glamorous lifestyle. But over time, I noticed how often his name came up, how she'd cancel dinner plans because of a late session, how she suddenly wanted to start a business, a cosmetic surgery clinic, with him as her partner. That was my line in the sand. When she asked me to fund the venture, I refused. I told her I wasn't going to pour millions into a risky business idea just because she was bored of being an influencer. She didn't take it well. Vanessa accused me of stifling her dreams, of using money to control her life. I tried to explain. It wasn't about control. It was about protecting what we built. But looking back, I think she had already made up her mind. The affair with Jason wasn't just personal. It was strategic. They were plotting something bigger than just sneaking around behind my back. And I was too focused on work, too confident in my precautions to see it coming. Then came the heart attack. It hit me during a conference in New York. 1 minute I was presenting to a room full of executives. The next I was on the floor, struggling to breathe. 3 weeks in the hospital gave me plenty of time to reflect, but not enough time to realize what Vanessa was doing back home. While I was hooked up to monitors, fighting to stay alive, she was emptying our accounts. By the time I returned to San Francisco, Vanessa and my fortune were gone. At first I was numb, not just from the physical weakness, but from the sheer disbelief that the woman I married could be so ruthless. But the more I thought about it, the clearer it became. Vanessa had never loved me. She loved the lifestyle, the security, the power that came with my bank account. And when I stopped giving her what she wanted, she took matters into her own hands. She thought she had won. What she didn't realize was that I never kept all my eggs in one basket. I sat alone in my living room, staring at the cold, empty spaces where Vanessa's designer furniture used to be. The silence was deafening. No more echo of her heels on the marble floors. No scent of her expensive perfume lingering in the air. Just me, and the brutal reality that I'd been robbed by the person I once trusted most. I opened my laptop, logging into every financial account I had, hoping, praying that maybe I'd missed something. But each screen told the same story. Our joint checking account, drained, savings, gone. Investment accounts I had set up in both our names, cleared out. She'd even sold my luxury watch collection through a private dealer. I found the receipts in a folder she must have forgotten to take. It wasn't just theft. It was a calculated wipeout. And the worst part? Legally, she had access to those accounts. As my wife, she didn't have to hack anything. She just waited for the perfect moment when I was too weak to stop her. For days I spiraled. I barely ate. I barely slept. I kept replaying every conversation, every red flag I ignored. How could I be so blind? Then I found the note. It wasn't long. Just a few lines scrawled on expensive stationery. I deserve better than being controlled by your money. Consider this my severance package. Don't bother looking for me. No apology, no remorse, just entitlement. That's when something inside me snapped. The grief, the humiliation, it all turned into something sharper, colder. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about betrayal, about principle. And if Vanessa thought I was going to roll over and accept this, she clearly forgot who she married. As I sat there gripping that note, a memory surfaced, something I hadn't thought about in years, the offshore account. Back when I first started working with high net worth clients, I'd seen it all. Messy divorces, gold diggers, family members turning on each other over money. One of my mentors gave me advice I never forgot. Trust is good, but a contingency plan is better. Sakutorm. So, quietly, I'd set up a safety net. A shell company registered in the Cayman Islands, tied to an account holding 60% of my true wealth. It was perfectly legal, perfectly discreet, and completely invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look, including Vanessa. While she thought she'd cleaned me out, she'd only touched what I allowed her to see. I leaned back, a slow smile creeping across my face for the first time since coming home. She thought she'd won the game. But I was the one who wrote the rules. Still, I knew better than to act impulsively. Vanessa wasn't just reckless, she was vindictive. If I went after her without a plan, she'd twist the story, play the victim, maybe even drag me through a public scandal. No, I needed leverage. That's when I called an old contact of mine, a private investigator named Martin. We'd worked together years ago when a client suspected his business partner of embezzlement. Martin was discreet, efficient, and most importantly, he didn't ask unnecessary questions. Within 48 hours, Martin had eyes on Vanessa. Turns out she hadn't gone far. She and Jason were living it up in Los Angeles, burning through my money like it was Monopoly cash. Five-star hotels, luxury shopping sprees, private parties. And yes, they were already in talks to lease a building for their so-called cosmetic clinic. Martin sent me photos. Vanessa draped over Jason's arm, flashing the same smile she used to give me when she wanted something expensive. It was surreal seeing her so carefree, like I was just a chapter she'd close without a second thought. But what Vanessa didn't realize was that every dollar she spent, every signature she scribbled, every move she made was being documented. I wasn't going to confront her yet. No, I was going to let her dig her own grave. Because soon enough, the money would run out. And when it did, she'd come crawling back, thinking she could bleed me for more. That's when I'd strike. This wasn't just revenge, it was justice, with interest. 3 weeks passed. Every morning, Martin would send me a fresh batch of updates, photos of Vanessa and Jason parading around Los Angeles like royalty, receipts from their outrageous spending, and notes on who they were meeting. It was almost impressive how fast they could burn through $2.4 million. Luxury cars, designer wardrobes, private chefs. They weren't investing a dime into that clinic they talked about. It was all about instant gratification. And I knew exactly how this story would end. By the end of the third month, Martin's report started to shift. Vanessa wasn't smiling as much in the photos. The shopping trips became fewer, the hotels less extravagant. Jason was spotted arguing with her outside a restaurant, voices raised, tension obvious. Then came the call I'd been waiting for. It was from a blocked number, but I recognized her voice immediately. Robert, we need to talk. I let her words hang in the air for a moment, like I actually needed time to decide. Finally, I answered, About what, Vanessa? You already said goodbye. She sighed, trying to mask the desperation creeping into her tone. Look, things got out of hand. I was angry. You were controlling. But we shared 8 years together. We shouldn't let money ruin everything. I almost laughed at the irony, but I kept my voice steady. You didn't seem too concerned about that when you emptied our accounts and vanished? There was a pause, long enough for me to imagine her scrambling for the right words. I made mistakes, okay? But we can work something out. I need access to some funds until I get back on my feet. There it was. The moment I knew would come. Vanessa wasn't calling out of guilt. She was calling because she was broke. I could hear the panic beneath her rehearsed lines, the realization that Jason wasn't the golden ticket she thought he'd be, that the lifestyle she stole was crumbling beneath her, and that's when I knew. There was no going back. Any lingering part of me that once cared for her was gone. This wasn't my wife. This was a parasite looking for its next host. I think you misunderstood, I said calmly. There's nothing to work out. You made your choice. Before she could respond, I hung up. I sat there for a moment, staring at my phone, feeling nothing. No sadness, no regret, just clarity. That call was the final nail in the coffin of whatever relationship we once had. But Vanessa wasn't done. 2 days later, I received a formal notice. She had filed for alimony. Her lawyer was demanding a substantial monthly payment, claiming that I had hidden assets during our marriage and that she was entitled to half of everything. I almost admired her audacity. She'd stolen millions, abandoned me while I was hospitalized, and now she was coming after more. But this was exactly what I'd been preparing for. I forwarded the notice to my attorney, Daniel, one of the best in San Francisco. It's time, I told him. Let's show them what real financial strategy looks like. Daniel didn't just smile. He grinned like a predator, spotting easy prey. We gathered everything. Martin's documentation, financial records, proof of Vanessa's affair, her abandonment, and the timeline of her theft. Every detail was lined up, airtight. There was no turning back now. Vanessa had walked into a battle she couldn't win, and I was about to make sure she understood exactly who she was dealing with. This wasn't just a divorce, this was the reckoning. Daniel and I knew exactly how this would play out. Vanessa's lawyer was confident, too confident. They assumed I was just another husband trying to hide money in a messy divorce. They thought they held the upper hand because Vanessa struck first. But what they didn't know was that every move they made had already been anticipated. The first hearing was scheduled within a month. Until then, Daniel advised me to stay silent. Let Vanessa believe she was about to cash in on what was left of my fortune. Meanwhile, we refined our strategy. The key wasn't just proving that Vanessa had stolen from me. It was showing the court exactly who she was when no one was looking. Martin's surveillance footage was gold. There were videos of Vanessa and Jason flaunting their affair in public, laughing over expensive dinners paid with my money. We had time-stamped receipts matching withdrawals from our joint accounts to purchases of luxury items, cars, jewelry, even a down payment on a beach condo. Daniel built a narrative that couldn't be refuted. A wife who abandoned her husband during a medical crisis, committed financial fraud, and now had the audacity to demand alimony after squandering stolen funds. But we weren't done yet. We traced several wire transfers Vanessa made to offshore accounts linked to Jason's name. She wasn't just spending recklessly, she was attempting to hide what she'd stolen. It was classic fraud. By the time the court date arrived, Daniel had compiled a dossier so thick it could have been a best-selling thriller. When I walked into that courtroom, I didn't feel nervous. I felt ready. Vanessa was already seated at the front, dressed in a conservative outfit that didn't suit her usual flashy style. It was clear her lawyer had coached her to look like the wronged woman. She barely looked at me, but I could see the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes. The first hint that maybe, just maybe, this wasn't going to be as easy as she thought. Her attorney stood up first, delivering a passionate speech about how Vanessa had been financially oppressed during our marriage, forced to live under my controlling ways, and now left destitute after I supposedly concealed marital assets. I almost wanted to applaud his performance. Then it was Daniel's turn. He stood calmly, opened our meticulously prepared file, and began presenting the evidence. One by one, the photos appeared on the screen. Vanessa and Jason, hand in hand at luxury boutiques, sipping champagne in rooftop bars, test driving sports cars. Receipts followed, bank statements, video clips. The courtroom was silent, except for the occasional shuffle of papers and the clicking of Daniel's remote as he advanced to the next damning slide. Vanessa's face drained of color with every passing minute, but Daniel saved the best for last. He presented the timeline, showing how, while I was hospitalized, Vanessa systematically drained our accounts, transferred funds to Jason, and disappeared without notice. Then he calmly placed a copy of Vanessa's handwritten note onto the evidence table. "Consider this my severance package." The judge leaned forward, scrutinizing the note, then glanced at Vanessa. Finally, Daniel addressed the court. "Your Honor, this isn't a case of a neglected spouse seeking fairness. This is a clear-cut example of abandonment, infidelity, and premeditated financial theft. My client isn't hiding assets. He's defending himself against a woman who thought she could exploit the legal system after robbing him blind." The judge turned to Vanessa's lawyer, who was now fumbling through his papers, clearly blindsided. And then, the moment I'd been waiting for. The judge ruled. Vanessa's alimony claim? Denied. Not only that, but she was ordered to repay the stolen funds, what little remained, and cover all my legal fees. It was a decisive, humiliating defeat. As the session ended, Vanessa avoided my gaze, grabbing her bag in a hurry to leave. But I wasn't done. On my way out, I spotted Jason waiting in the hallway. His confident smirk faded the second I walked up to him. Without a word, I handed him a business card. He looked down to read it. Daniel's contact information printed neatly across the front. "You'll need this," I said quietly. "Trust me, when she's done with you, you'll wish you'd never met her." I walked away without looking back. The plan had worked perfectly. Vanessa thought she could destroy me, but I built my life and my fortune on knowing how to protect what mattered. And now, I was free. As I stepped out of that courthouse, a weight I didn't realize I'd been carrying finally lifted. For months, I'd been living in the shadow of Vanessa's betrayal, haunted by the image of everything I'd built being stripped away. But now I stood with my head high, knowing I hadn't just survived, I'd won. Not out of spite, not out of anger, but because I refused to let someone like Vanessa rewrite the story of my life. The fallout came faster than I expected. Within a week, word spread through Vanessa's social circles. The influencer who once flaunted luxury trips and designer handbags was now the subject of whispered gossip about court judgments, frozen accounts, and a boyfriend who was nowhere to be seen. Jason didn't stick around long. Martin kept me updated. Turns out when Vanessa's credit cards started getting declined, Jason found himself a new client, someone younger and richer. Vanessa tried to keep up appearances online, posting throwback photos and inspirational quotes about new beginnings. But the truth had a way of creeping in. The bank repossessed the condo she and Jason had leased. Her luxury car, gone within days. She even tried reaching out to mutual acquaintances, spinning tales about how I'd trapped her financially and manipulated the court system. But no one bought it. The evidence was too public, too clear. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Silence was the loudest message I could send. Meanwhile, I quietly shifted my focus back to what I did best: rebuilding, strategizing, and moving forward. I transferred a portion of my offshore funds back into new domestic accounts, this time solely in my name. I sold the house Vanessa had tried to turn into a showroom for her ego and downsized to a sleek apartment overlooking the bay. It wasn't about the space, it was about peace, about creating a life where trust wasn't a liability. But the real victory wasn't in the money. It was in knowing I never had to look over my shoulder again. One afternoon, a letter arrived, handwritten, no return address. I recognized Vanessa's handwriting instantly. I debated tossing it in the trash, But curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single page. I hope you're happy. You ruined everything we had. I loved you once, but you cared more about control than us. One day you'll realize money can't keep you warm at night. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it in a drawer. Not out of sentimentality, but as a reminder. A reminder of how close I came to losing everything. Not because I made bad investments, but because I trusted the wrong person. Vanessa was right about one thing. Money doesn't keep you warm at night, but neither does betrayal. And I'd rather sleep alone than ever share my life, or my fortune, with someone who sees love as a transaction. Weeks turned into months, and life settled into a new rhythm. I reconnected with old friends, took time off to travel, not to impress anyone, but simply to enjoy the freedom I'd fought for. Every now and then, I'd hear whispers about Vanessa, taking odd jobs, trying to reinvent herself. But I paid it no mind. She was no longer my problem. The final piece of closure came unexpectedly. Daniel called me one morning, amused. "You'll appreciate this," he said. "Guess who reached out asking for a consultation?" I didn't have to guess. Vanessa had given Jason that same look she once gave me. The look that said, "You're my next opportunity." And when he bailed, she was left scrambling for someone to blame. It was poetic, really. But I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Because in the end, Vanessa taught me a lesson far more valuable than anything I could have learned on Wall Street. Some investments, especially the emotional ones, carry risks no amount of money can insure. And walking away with your integrity intact, that's priceless. It's been over a year since that chapter of my life closed. Looking back, it's almost surreal how quickly everything unraveled, and how much stronger I became because of it. I used to believe that success was measured by numbers in a bank account, the value of a portfolio, or the luxury of the lifestyle you could afford. But surviving Vanessa taught me something far more important. True wealth isn't just about money, it's about security, the kind you build not just with financial strategies, but with wisdom, boundaries, and knowing who deserves a place in your life. I don't hate Vanessa. In fact, I'm grateful, because she revealed a truth I might have ignored for too long. That blind trust, especially when mixed with greed and entitlement, is a dangerous game. These days, I live simpler. I still manage investments, but I invest more in myself, my health, my peace of mind, and relationships built on respect, not transactions. People often ask me if I'll ever remarry. Maybe. But if I do, it won't be with someone impressed by wealth or status. It'll be with someone who values the things money can't buy: integrity, loyalty, and honesty. If there's one lesson I'd share from all of this, it's this: always prepare for storms, even when the sky is clear. Not because you expect betrayal, but because life has a way of testing your foundations when you least expect it. And when that moment comes, you'll be glad you protected more than just your assets. You'll be glad you protected yourself. So to anyone out there who's ever been blindsided by someone they trusted, remember, it's not about how much you lose, it's about how you rise after. And sometimes, and the best revenge isn't getting even, it's thriving in a life they can no longer touch.